Over a century ago, the great naturalist John Muir once observed that when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. And aren't we learning that all over again these days? This pandemic is rather demanding that we marvel at our entwinement. For we are indeed hitched. We've been learning that where one travels has consequences for what we bring home. We may make our own decisions, but they're not made in isolation. I was talking a week or so ago with Galen Bedwell about how odd it had been for churches not to be stopping by the garden center this season to pick up all those Easter lilies to decorate their sanctuaries, which of course were dark because of the pandemic and the necessary closures. That, Galen said, was wince enough, but he more so lamented the loss of revenue by the small grower up near Boone, who back in December planted all those bulbs in his greenhouse and through the months ensuing has been watering and heating and tending thousands and thousands of bulbs that he then grows to lilies to supply garden houses around like Bedwell's. He's the one who's really suffering, Galen said. And I guess I'd never really thought about where all those flowers come from. Restaurants, we have been aware, have had a struggle in all of this too. A few of them managing to stay open, reduced to carry-out service alone, but many more of them simply closed. And it's easy to see how devastating that is for the owners and the employees, but then I read how Lafredo, the wholesale produce supplier and distributor, has started selling boxes retail out of their parking lot. Indeed, our own capital city Fruit doing the same. And I hadn't really thought about all those suppliers behind the scenes of all those restaurants. The ripples reach out further and further in ways we seldom see. We're all connected. Start teasing out all the people and all the enterprises behind every other person and every other enterprise, and before long it's apparent how few degrees of separation exist between any of us. We are hitched together. The Apostle Paul understood that. Think of the way he described the church as a kind of body in which all the respective parts work in concert to animate a functioning whole. Everything, according to the image, has its valuable and interconnected part to play. While he was writing to churches, focusing on their constituent interconnections, he knew it extended beyond the merely human. In the first chapter of his letter to the Romans, he observes that pretty much everything we need to know about God, and by extension each other, we can learn from nature. Indeed, the ancients recognized nature to have been the first Bible. The writer of Genesis certainly understood it. Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century put it bluntly, sacred writings, he asserted, are bound in two volumes, that of creation and that of Holy Scripture. Somewhere along the way, though, we lost sight of that sacredness, that other holy script, and with what it teaches us about our intrinsic interconnectedness with all that is. We got it into our heads that we were really the only thing that mattered. Nature, we concluded, was simply our little toy closet filled for the sole purpose of our personal and collective pleasure, and we could do with it precisely as we would. And we did. You know, it's kind of ironic. We get understandably incensed when someone trashes the version of the Bible that has a table of contents and a collection of maps bound between two covers, but we've largely been indifferent to the blatant mistreatment of that other Bible. A short and simple walk along our road recently revealed an embarrassing collection of litter and garbage that oblivious people have, for whatever reason, felt completely free to discard into the culvert. But the disregard is hardly confined to the roadsides. Across this planet and beyond into the atmosphere that supports it, we have blithely drilled and sucked and spilled and poisoned and belched all manner of toxins as it suited us. But a few are waking up. 50 years ago this month, creation-minded people began an effort to change the way we relate to this earth that is the Lord's, along with everything therein. Earth Day, observed now for 5 decades on April the 22nd, has become a time to reread that first Bible with fresh eyes and fresh comprehension, to rehabilitate the planet bit by bit and our intimately connected relationship with it. Because the truth is, we can't live without it, our brother, sister in the family of creation. Whether or not we like the humility of it, we are, in fact, hitched to everything else in the universe. And we're beginning to notice. Scientists over the past several years have been learning fresh insights, for example, into the ways that forests thrive using what has rather whimsically been called the wood wide web. Those curious growths that we generally thought of as parasites, fungi, and mosses turn out to be essential to tree vitality and even collaboration. Researchers like Peter Wohlleben, who describes it in his marvelous book, The Hidden Life of Trees, have come to observe how those humble and heretofore dismissed organisms plug into the root systems of trees and plants at a cellular level and create an interface across which resources and messages are subsequently carried. And then those fungi plug into the roots of other trees, and so the trees can talk to each other after a fashion. What we might have sought to eradicate as harmful turns out to be among the most mystical keys to the forest's survival. Taken as an analog, it does kind of make you wonder what might be the fungi and hyphae in our neighborhoods or churches or cultures. The task, as the Apostle Paul in particular and the first Bible in general imply it, is not then identifying around us what all to exploit and reject and eradicate and fence out, but rather to discern within all these precious and diverse things that God has made their inherent occasion for holy thanksgiving. What, in other words, might be their good and valuable contribution that I simply haven't recognized, and how might I make room for it? Blessing us both. Discerning and incorporating and then celebrating the abundance that suddenly surrounds us. The first Bible, which, as the Apostle Paul acknowledged, tells us pretty much everything we need to know about God, keeps reminding that these problems is not in the capacity of all those wonders around me to be, but rather in my capacity to see. The work, in other words, is on my side of the street. But I don't have to work it alone. I can ask the animals. They'll teach me. The birds of the air, they'll tell me. I can ask the plants of the earth, and they'll have something to say. The fish of the sea, they too will declare. Because who among all these doesn't know that the hand of the Lord has done all this? In God's hand is the life of every living thing, the breath of every human being. May the fruit we gather from this season of planting contain the seeds for still more expansive thanksgiving as we continually discover how bad we need each other in this abundant, inseparably intertwined community of grace. Thanks be to God.